What's up, guys? Welcome back to Engine25 Reviews. This is a show where I invite friends, colleagues, academics, others who are way smarter and more qualified than me, and we each talk about movies, TV shows, and just generally nerd out about stuff we think is cool. If you like that, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, tell your friends. I've been away a while, but back in the swing. I'm going to do my best to get episodes bi-weekly, like before, usually on Sundays. If you ring that bell, you'll never miss one. We're available on video on YouTube, as well as an audio podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. That's a mouthful now. Just search Engine25 Reviews on your favorite service, no space in Engine25, or hit one of the links in the notes down below. My name's Brandon. I'm your host. You can find me at Engine25 on all the things. Sometimes there's an underscore at the end. Today we're talking about Scream 6. Pretty excited about that. But before we get there, I would like to introduce my guest. This is writer and director Dayna Noffke. She's been on the show before. She's a WGA writer and director of short films, several of which I have worked on, which is exciting. She's currently crowdfunding her first feature film titled Eidolon, which I will link down in the show notes below. How are you doing, Dayna? How are you doing tonight?
Good. I'm, as you said, I'm in the midst of crowdfunding, so I am on a nonstop roller coaster, as all filmmakers and people who have done crowdfunding can attest.
I tried it for a personal project in college once, and it was awful, and I wish you the best. It seems to be doing well so far, so that's good news. But yeah. Good luck with that. Very happy to have you back, of course. See if I can find the button. There we go. So today, first thing I want to ask, haven't talked to you in a while. What have you been up to? What have you been watching primarily?
Gosh, I've been watching less stuff than I would like.
It's because you're trying to make a movie.
Again, because of the crowdfunding thing. So we've been shooting teasers, and we're in kind of very early pre-production for that. I have been going to the theater a lot to escape that. So Scream 6 and Cocaine Bear.
I didn't get to see Cocaine Bear. I was looking forward to it.
Let me just say this.
Yeah, please.
It is as advertised. And I mean that in the greatest way. There's a bear, there's cocaine, people get ripped apart. 11 out of 10 no notes. Like, it's exactly what I wanted. Yeah, it's a fun time. Really fun.
Perfect.
New series. I actually went back to kind of a drama series and started Mayans MC. Just for something completely
different. It's the sequel to the biker show. I'm sorry. Yeah. That I could have told you until I asked. Sons of Anarchy. Yeah. That's cool. And talking about Scream 6 this week. Scream 6 is directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Garrett, the Radio Silence guys. Written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick. Reported budget of $33 to $35 million. Nothing, I couldn't find anything specific. That's just what Wikipedia said. As of today, Saturday, March 18th, been on a little over a week. The worldwide box office is around 88 million, which is really, really good. So I think it's probably just a matter of time before they announce Scream 7 at this point. It took about a month before they announced this one, a month after the release of Scream 5, which I kind of affectionately call 5 Cream, because that's how they put the 4 in the middle of the word for Scream 4. So I always wanted it to be the S to be a 5, but maybe I'm just making fun of it. I would like to poke. What is your? I know you're a horror movie buff, but like, what talk about your history with horror movies and like the Scream series specifically? Did you like the last movie? Because I would say that your reaction to Scream 5 was kind of mixed, particularly compared to this one, because most of what I've seen about Scream 6 is largely positive, but I've seen a lot of people that like Scream 5 and a lot of people that don't. So I'm just curious, what's your history with slasher movies and Scream movies, and did you like the last one?
Okay. Me and slasher movies go way back. It was the first kind of horror movies I watched when I was a kid because we had HBO and that was like the forbidden thing. So of course you
Mhm.
had to do it. So the first movies that I saw, I wouldn't say they're favorites of mine, but I have nostalgia for them. Silent Scream, Black Christmas, and Dressed to Kill are the first
Nice.
three horror movies I remember watching. My all-time favorite franchise, and well, really, it's one of my all-time favorite movies because it isn't just a horror movie. Is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, it's kind of a strange psychodrama, right? It's not
Right.
just a slasher.
Absolutely.
So that's my favorite franchise. Scream is my second favorite. I have been hooked from the first one, and I think that meta horror is a really particular flavor, right? It is really divisive. So I think they're already starting at the gate with like this kind of hurdle to get over to get you on board with the meta stuff. And yeah, I don't think five quite hit it right.
You don't.
Uh,
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't say it's one of the strongest movies in the series, but like in general, I really liked it. I love the new cast. I like that they were, like they kind of compared to the previous movies, they bumped up the ante on the violence a little bit, and they were, like willing to take chances, like, and or like willing to make changes to the series. Like they spoiler alert for a movie that came out a year ago, like, they killed Dewey, which was like, that would upset me at the time. Oh yeah, it's I love Dewey. And his theme music, which is actually the theme from Broken Arrow. And then like yeah, there is just some very interesting gags in that one. Like I love the first scene with the like Jenna Ortega's in the house alone, and he's messing with the smart locks. And that's like just things that literally didn't exist 10 years ago when the last movie came out. And just like, so in general, I would say I liked it. I wouldn't call it one of the better ones.
Yeah, well, exactly. Let me clarify and say I did
Sure.
not dislike it. And I love this franchise and this series and the fact that each one is its own individual murder mystery so much that, sometimes in franchises it becomes like Stockholm syndrome, right? Like you're there no matter what they're going to give you, I will be there. But some will be
I mean,
better
and
than
that's
others.
true. And that's kind of why some of these franchises go on for 9 or 10 or 15 movies. You bring up an interesting point, I think, about meta horror, and that's, I think, one of the reasons that Scream still works and Scream hooks so many people, especially early on, was like, because it's still, like it's a really interesting whodunit. Like it's a murder mystery thing that takes place in a high school, which, at that point in time was a little unusual. We're talking about mid 90s. I want to say 96. Not looking at it right now in the fur, but and generally in a slasher movie, the slasher, like he might be supernatural or he might just be a guy, but you kind of know who it is from the jump. So the mystery aspect of it is interesting to a lot of people, and they are also like legitimately scary, following up an era where slasher movies had kind of become a joke.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The opening scenes, and again, I go back and now I'm like, I like five. I do. I
Yeah.
love the opening scene. I love Jenna Ortega. The opening scenes are some of my favorite parts. And when we get to six, I'll say I really liked that opening scene too. It's one of my favorite things is seeing what they do with that set piece. Like what else, where else do they have to go? Because
Yeah,
every
because every
time,
movie up until this point has been, creative and surprising and very different, even compared to other movies in the series. And that's, going 6 movies in to a franchise that's like ostensibly the structure is the same 6 times now. So it's, but the opening scene has always been surprising, which is I think pretty cool.
I agree. And I'll tell you my biggest disappointment about Scream 5
What's that?
is that I watched some previews because I was too excited not to, but I tried to avoid everything, and I had myself absolutely convinced that Stu was coming back. I just like I built it up in my mind. I was ready for it. I was like,
Oh,
it's gonna happen.
there were some hints in Scream 6 where it was just like, all right, if they pull out Matthew Lillard, I'm gonna scream. Like,
I know, right? And no, my poor daughter accidentally actually spoiled it for me and told me that he wasn't in it right before I went. So that's my biggest complaint
that's
about
okay.
Scream.
Okay, so I will. Talking about bringing back old cast, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But still, and we can keep it to nothing specific. But how do you feel about a character? You know, it's revealed in Scream 5 that Melissa Barrera's character is the illegitimate son of Billy Loomis, played by Skeet Ulrich, and it's and I think that's fine. Like, I think she hallucinates seeing visions of him, and that was one of the changes in Scream 5 that I felt like it just seemed a little out of place because it hadn't been done in this series before, and it's like, but they continue with that. I'm sure that's not a super spoiler because it was in the last movie. It's the same characters, but it worked for me better this time. They do it more sparingly than this. Like, it felt like he was talking to her every 5 minutes in Scream 5, and it just didn't really work for me. But so that's one of the knocks I would give it. But
I mean, I have to agree with that. I mean, I love Skeet Ulrich. I love Loomis, but yeah, they didn't. I mean, if you're going to bring somebody back, it's kind of the way I felt about bringing back, say, like Sally Hardesty or somebody else in a big franchise, even Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, whatever.
sure,
If you're going to bring it back, you better have something big for them to do. You know what I mean?
you need a good reason. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, for them to be there. And I mean, I do really appreciate that they're trying to do something different. I just don't know if it entirely landed for me. Yeah, that part of it.
I agree with that. So kind of shifting, moving focus more on Scream 6. I heard I saw some stuff on Facebook. You went to see this with some friends in 4DX, and I was just wondering if you could talk about that experience, because I've done ScreenX where they're like it's projected on the walls, but I've never done 4DX. So that's what's that like for this?
Yeah, I had not been to a 4D movie before, other than like things at amusement parks, which is kind of a whole
like, so I guess I've probably done it at Disney World, but
yeah, but I did not know what I was in for. So we sat down and it's like, it really is like, they look like ride seats. Like, they're comfortable, but they're like very kind of padded recliners that are like super upright and they have footrests. So I sat down and I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Then I look over and there's a button that says water on, water off. And I was like, I don't know the situation. I'm just going to go with off right now. I still got wet anyway, which is a different story of how so even if you shut the water off, don't count on it. Oh, it was crazy. So it worked well. I could see it working better for action, but I'm really glad I did it just because it was kind of a singular experience.
right.
I don't know how much I should give away, but the seat moves, the seat pokes you. There's water that squirts out at
Yeah, like I heard that there's like blood splatter and it's just like water hits you in the face. Yeah.
When people are falling, the seats kind of move forward and backward. And when there's like a really wide pan or a slide or whatever dolly shot, it'll kind of move you with it so you feel more in the film. And it was also in 3D, but they didn't use the 3D very much.
Okay.
And yeah, at one point I looked over at my friend who was with us and bought a beer, and there was a scene where someone was getting chased and the chairs were just like back and forth. I look over and he's just sitting there with his beer like this.
Was it Chris Etheridge?
It was Chris Etheridge.
I'm shocked.
It was so funny to watch. A couple of our friends had bought beers, and my husband and I looked over at them and we were like, that's hilarious.
Maybe a bad idea. Yeah, Chris Etheridge, friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool. Look those up. So it was really cool, and I would do it. I definitely think the technology is built more for action scenes than slashers. So I think it's really cool that they decided.
I would say the same thing about like Screen X. Weirdly, it was Chris Etheridge that I saw a Screen X movie with. It was Alita Battle Angel. Several years ago now, pre-pandemic. And it was like in really fast action scenes, it was awesome. But then like you get to these big sprawling shots of a city environment and you're like, oh, wow. And you feel like you should be able to look around because you're surrounded by this image. But it looks really bad. Like it's out of focus and it's dark. Like it's not as bright as the main screen. So like you can't. The movie is still happening in front of you on the main screen, and it's just like it makes it more immersive if the camera's moving really fast. But when it's not moving and you want to, like, it seems like you should be able to look around, but it's just really ugly when you do. Anyway,
yeah, I've never had a chance to see one like that.
Yeah, they have a Screen X at the Regal in Atlantic Station downtown.
And that's where we saw the 4D, and I walked by and I was like,
nice.
Oh, they have one of those, It seems to me like it would be a little disorienting, or I wouldn't know where to look. So
I mean, yeah, like because you're still, that's the thing, you're still watching a movie. So like the movie is still happening on the screen in front, and they just kind of, they expand the environment to a degree. And it's just like, so again, it feels like you should be able to look around like one of those 360 movies they have at like Disney World, but it doesn't look good when you do that. It's just kind of like, it just makes it wide enough so that you can't see the side if you're going. There's a really fast action scene where you're like, it's a race basically, and that was amazing. And then the rest of it was just kind of, all right, this is a thing that's happening. Remember to keep it general, but like, did you like Scream 6? Like, did you like it better than Scream 5?
I did. I absolutely loved it. It hit all the right buttons for me. I think that they found a way to bring it back through the entire franchise and do the whole, we're in a franchise now, in a very clever way that, I mean, everyone I saw it with is really into the Scream franchise, but I feel like even if you weren't totally on board with all the movies that came before it, you could still enjoy it and still get like that little nostalgia rush because of the way the characters talk about the things that happened in the past and the story that you're given.
Yeah, I fill in some background here. Like, I when I was a kid, I had an older brother. He's 6 years older than me, and it was very hard for my parents to prevent me from watching the things he was watching. And also like we had a TV. So it was like, I was a big monster movie kid, even at this point. And my dad I feel like by now had already shown me like the Alien movies. And I was a big Jaws fan. That was on TV every weekend. And, there was always some kind of Godzilla movie playing on TV. Trying to think, Scream might be the first slasher movie I remember watching.
Really?
Yeah, but I was little, so it's like my brother rented it and we watched it like at home, and it was like the real version. It wasn't like the edited for TV or whatever. Like, and it probably I remember watching it. I don't have any clear memories of it like scaring me or whatever. But I also I didn't get it, obviously, because I hadn't seen any of the things it was referencing. But like the growing up, it's probably the one that got me into slasher movies specifically. So then whenever there was a Freddy movie or Jason or Halloween or whatever, like they always do marathons on TBS of that kind of thing. So I would always watch them when they were on, and then. A little bit later, probably around when Scream 3 came out, this would have been playing on TV again, and that's when it probably really clicked for me. It was a few years later, and I was old enough to like appreciate it and understand it. And by then, I was only 12 or 13, even by that point. But no, yeah, it was probably by virtue of it being definitely one of the earliest ones I've seen. But I love the Scream movies. As long as I can like remember watching them, and my appreciation for them has only grown as I've gotten older. And it's, yeah, like, and you can almost always like go back, particularly the earlier ones, and realize something because they're so meta, you know, like, and it's Wes Craven, so he's the genius that started it all, really. You know, I get Halloween, I guess, was before Friday the 13th, but Halloween didn't make slasher movies a genre like the early 80s did, at least in my opinion. So it's, you know, I love the self-awareness and any of that mess. I'm a big sucker for. So it's
as am I. Well, because I'm a horror nerd.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking about. So it's not unrealistic to me. I think some people are like, people really talk like this about sequels and requels, and I'm like, do.
Well, it's because it's
theorize.
It's that the Scream movies are if me and my friends were the victims in a slasher.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that you say, you know, you must have had a very different experience watching it the first time than I did because I'm older than you. And I was aware enough at the time I saw it for the first time to know going into it that Drew Barrymore is the big star here, right? And we expected her to
I knew Drew Barrymore because, you know, like I was a Spielberg kid, you know, Jurassic Park and all that, but also like I was aware of her because of E.T. So I was like, yeah, like, oh, it's the girl from E.T. She's all grown up now, blah, blah, blah. Like it's
right, but were you old enough to, so I went in assuming based on the poster and just knowing that she's the only known star in this movie at that time, right? That she was going to be the final girl. So when I mean, I was old enough to be aware of all of that. So when they killed her off, it was like,
what? That's hard to say. Like if I knew before watching it, or like, and remember, like I would have watched it on home video, not in the theater. So it was out already. Like, or like the twists of the movie were like out in the air. Like my brother might have told me. Or, you know, like she's going to get it now, you know, like we're sitting around a table, like, you know, it's like this, we're almost cheering on the killer, but like, you know, predicting what's happening, blah, blah, blah. So it's, I mean, it's hard to say, like, I don't think I would have had the wherewithal to know that, okay, she's the big star here and it would be wild for something to happen to her. But I mean, you know, obviously it's that, I figured that out pretty fast as I grew up and watched more movies. Like that doesn't happen. The closest thing to it is like Janet Leigh dying in Psycho, and that was 30 years before this.
I mean, yeah, I have a very distinct memory of the theater just like losing it and wondering would know.
Yeah, you know, and the Scream movies, like they go on to make movies about movies. Like the Stab movies are referenced in the Scream films, and they're movies within movies about the events that happen in each Scream movie, and you know, and it's that eventually like really goes over the top in Scream 4 and 5. Like it's really, I love this franchise.
Yeah, it works for me. The Stab thing because they embrace it and they go all in. I think that I think it's an all or nothing situation, and they've just stuck with it, and it's become a running bit, and I love it.
Okay, moving on. I would like to touch on. Well, actually, we talked about in the pre-show. One more question because I want to talk about the cast, but one more question: how do you think this would play for newcomers? You know, like so. Because my wife and I are longtime fans, and in fact, like this is the third Scream movie.
I don't know that one.
Alexa just tried to talk to me. Anyway, this is the third Scream movie I've seen with her in the theater. Because we met like shortly before Scream 4, so it was probably one of the earliest movies we saw together. But you know, so I think there is enough here for it to be entertaining. It's like, especially if you're maybe not Scream fans, but like, you know, you've seen some slasher movies. You know, Freddy, Jason, Texas Chainsaw, any of that kind of thing. I think there's definitely enough here to enjoy it. Like it's sometimes the meta parts of it might annoy people if you're not into that specifically. You know, like we kind of mentioned that, but like, how do you think Scream 6 would play for people who haven't seen the other Scream movies?
It's so hard to put myself in that headspace. It's funny because even my daughter is a huge Scream fan and she went to see it with me, but she knows all that stuff. So it's hard for me to put myself in that frame, but I do feel like just as a straight up slasher mystery, it plays really well, and I think it would be a perfectly enjoyable, well, it would be a perfectly enjoyable way to spend a couple hours, but you're missing a lot.
I mean, and that's what, like it's like it's smart, like, and one of the reasons I love it is Scream. They're some of the smartest horror movies out there, but like you don't. Again, kind of like I said earlier, it is still like an interesting whodunit, even like even if it's a little cheesy in that regard, but and it's legitimately scary. And I would say they have maintained those things even late into the franchise. Like there are still some interesting surprises, and the suspense here is, excuse me, there are definitely some moments that got to me, like, and they're both the two biggest, most exciting beats I think here are, unfortunately, like they don't show the whole thing in the trailers, but they're both in there, so I'm going to mention them. There's a bit on a ladder that is pretty intense, and then there's a scene on the subway, which kind of it uses some tricks of that environment in very interesting ways. So I think, in light of all of that, it's absolutely. I think it would still be really entertaining for someone who doesn't know all the characters already, but you definitely get more out of it if you're a longtime fan, for sure.
Right. I mean, and it's giving nothing away to say that in the previews they show that there's definitely, well, there's always a link to the past in Scream. It's part of what I like about it. Adds to the mystery, but there's very obvious callbacks.
Oh yeah.
And physical clues leading back to all the earlier Scream movies. And I don't know about you, but I had an amazing time taking in the environment and trying to pick out all the Easter eggs and figure out where each thing came from, which movie.
We'll talk about that because I have a couple of beats to mention there. When we go to spoilers, how about the cast here? They call them the core four in the movie. And that's adorable. But so it's Jenna Ortega, Melissa Barrera, Jasmine Savoy Brown, and the guy who plays Chad that I didn't write down here, dude.
Gooding.
Mason Gooding, yes. And yeah, and I'm a fan of Melissa Barrera. She was in The Heights, which I absolutely adored. Jenna Ortega, she's going places right now. She's just coming right off of Tim Burton's Wednesday, which was incredibly successful on Netflix. Did you see X?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. God, it's so good. It's so much fun. Yeah. This is a horror movie came out about a year ago that everyone should check out with Jenna Ortega. Quick note. Have you heard the possibility of Beetlejuice 2 actually coming back around with Jenna Ortega?
I have.
And how do you feel about it?
Well, the rumors circle so often that eventually I just stop listening. I think I will follow Jenna Ortega anywhere at this point.
I kind of do too, and it's there have been a lot of people have talked about Beetlejuice 2 for 25 years. That's not a new thing, but the new rumor, Tim Burton is back in favor with Wednesday, and Jenna Ortega is only going to get bigger. Michael Keaton is about to be in the, things with the DC universe are weird and baffling, but Michael Keaton's about to come back big time in the Flash movie. So I think it passes the smell test. It's gonna, if it's ever gonna happen, the time is right. And otherwise, if it falls through this time, it's just never gonna happen.
I mean, here's my feeling on franchises. I try to look at each movie as its individual, as an individual movie and judge it on its own merit.
Totally.
I try not to get all worked up about something before I see it, because within each franchise, I'm always going to have favorites and I'm always going to have those I like less. And that's fine, because just because it's not my favorite doesn't mean it isn't someone's favorite. And frankly, if there's an entry I'm not crazy about, what do I care? Like, it doesn't erase what came before it or what came after it. And
Absolutely.
I'm just happy to have more content in that universe. So sure, go for it. Make Beetlejuice too, because I like those characters. I like that world. And if it doesn't work for me, it's not erasing
It
Beetlejuice.
won't be the first time that like a legacy sequel has come around and missed the mark. But if it works, it works, and great,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might not. So I'm always happy, when new stuff comes out in a franchise I like. And for that matter, not just franchises, but worlds that I like, sure, tell me as many stories as you can.
Let's do it. I also really like Jasmine Savoy Brown. She's from The Leftovers. She plays a major role in a video game, the recent Spider-Man Miles Morales video game, and gives a great performance in that. And you mentioned in the pre-show, you love her because she's the new Randy Meeks, Jamie Kennedy from the original trilogy. Kind of explaining we're in a movie, and this is what's going to happen, and this is what you can do, and this is what you can't do.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite. I am a huge Matthew Lillard fan, so
Me too.
nobody's ever going to beat Stu. But I think Randy is a close second run for my all-time favorite. I love all my Final Girls, but man, I love me some Video Store Nerd. He's amazing. So I really appreciated that they brought his niece and nephew in, and they didn't just make it like, well, this is the niece and nephew and then never play off of it. No,
Right.
he passed the mantle, and he passed the mantle to Mindy, which I love because she's so good at it. She's so smart and she's so funny. And there's a scene in this movie where two women, it's her and another, I don't know if I should say, okay. Her and another woman are going back and forth and trading little horror quips, like
Sure.
best night on Elm Street, and they both name it, and best this, best that, best that. And they get to the end and they say, all right, game respects game.
Yes.
So
Love
fun,
it.
so fun. Love her. Yeah, she's one of my favorite parts of the series.
Two more cast call outs I want to make. Good old Dermot Mulroney. He's been around since the 80s. Like, I know him mainly from like Young Guns and The Wedding Date, like in the 90s. It's always cool to see him and stuff. He's been doing a lot of TV lately. And then the return of Hayden Panettiere as Kirby from Scream 4. And Scream 4, that's my favorite sequel, like favorite movie after the first one in this series. So I was thrilled when they revealed she was coming back. I was very excited.
Yeah, I was excited for her too. I think I've been thinking about my rankings since I've seen Scream 6 twice now, and I honestly think 6 is in second place now for me. I think it's
Wow.
original and then 6. So I really liked
it. Okay. Last thoughts before we get to spoilers. I just want to talk about every movie. Whoa. Audio just clicked like crazy. I apologize for that. I'm going to turn me down. I got a little excited there. I'm going, before this, most of the movies took place in Woodsboro, except Scream 3, which is ironically the one that I don't like, even though it seems tailor-made for everything that I love in the world. But they make the move to New York City. The girls, they graduated high school and they moved to New York to go to college and to get away from the town where a crazy man in a mask tried to kill them. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on this. Like, a change of scenery is always nice. It makes a different environment. I think like New York is one of the most crowded places in the world. Like, there's always people around, which I think kind of changes the atmosphere in a slasher movie. Like, they're usually in Woodsboro. It's a small town in the, like, not in the middle of nowhere, but it's, it's in the rural parts of California, just outside of LA. But you're not on a street with 1,000 people running from a guy with a knife. And that kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. Was New York the right place?
I think it was fine. I think I would have been happy either way, but Probably was a smart choice, right? How
Yeah.
many different scenes can you get happening in Woodsboro? I mean, we've seen the high school, we've seen everywhere there is to see, right? I what I think is interesting about the New York choice is just that it's the safety in numbers thing, right? Like you were
Yeah.
saying, how are they going to treat this when your first instinct, if like as a woman, if someone's, making you feel uncomfortable or something, what do? You go to a place with people, right? Well, the entire city of New York is a place with people, and to be that anonymous and then still not be safe is like a whole nother level of fear, I think, and it's kind of cool. Although I have to say, my first thought anytime anyone goes to New York is just Jason Takes Manhattan. And I can't stop thinking
That
about
they did you it's in the movie. Do you see there's about 3 seconds of Jason Takes Manhattan like on the TV. Somebody's watching
that's
it.
what okay, I was trying to figure out which Friday the 13th part that was.
I mean, I didn't go back and watch the movie, but I am almost certain that it's Jason Takes Manhattan because it's where he punches the glass, like he punches the mirror, because he thinks he sees the girl's reflection and he punches the mirror thinking it's her.
Okay. We're gonna have to confirm this. Because yeah, when I was watching it, I was like, which one is that? Which one is that? And I'm not enough of a Friday the 13th nerd to figure it out. Although we were also with our friend Stacy, who you know, and I'm 90% sure that Stacy was like, "Oh, it's part," but I couldn't hear
Oh,
her.
she would know. Yeah, and I've
Yeah, she
definitely
knew.
seen them
She
all,
knew
but
the answer.
that's a series where there's a lot of bad ones, and I don't watch those every year, if you know what I mean. So it's
Once in a while, they're all fun. That's
oh
what
no,
they're
that's
all
what like it's always a good time. Like they're almost comedies, like in a funky way. But that's and then one quick question: why does Halloween last for an entire week in New York City? It's just like people going to Halloween parties like every day for this entire movie. Like,
I mean, have you met me?
fair.
If you got a chance to stretch Halloween out, sure, why not? I mean, I don't know. I think
I know.
that's
I just
sure.
it's how many this movie takes place over several days, and there's always somebody in costume in every scene. Like,
Okay, but like the whole week before Halloween and even a day or two after, you could have parties or you could be going to a haunted house. I think that's a really nitpicky thing.
I just thought it was funny. You're probably
It's like
right.
Rob Zombie's world. Rob Zombie's
And not to say it's not, it's used effectively in the movie. Like being on, especially on the train with a bunch of people in costume. It's very interesting, but it's it noticed for a couple of days. And then one more small bit. Violence. The Scream movies, they are historically like slasher movies in general, but historically on the lower end of it in as far as budget, even among like kind of horror stuff. And really what that means is they can't show a lot of people getting stabbed and mangled, etc. They show the aftermath more than they show the actual act. Like Drew Barrymore dies 10 minutes into the first movie, but they don't show what happens to her. Really, they show the first plunge and then the aftermath. But in Scream 5 and in this movie even more so, there's a lot of repeated stabbing and blood and this knives visibly going into places. The scene in the bodega store, there's a I don't know if it's a spoiler, but I think it's in one of the trailers. I don't recall Ghostface ever picking up a gun before, and he takes the shotgun from the shop owner and does things with the shotgun. It's just like definitely a marked step up in terms of the violence that the movie is willing to show us as it's happening. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts, complaints. Does it thrill you? Is it weird? Does it feel weird for the series, or is it how do you feel about it?
I mean, I think that they're at a good place right now because I like slashers. I mean, I like the kills.
Yeah.
That's what they were there for, right? So yeah, when Mindy gives the big speech and she's kind of talking about the rules, which is her role in this. She's talking about how we're in a franchise, everything's bigger. And so I appreciate that they link it all up together. And yes, there are more kills. I do think there's kind of a tipping point that I hope they don't go over into, which is a point where it just feels to me, I mean, and everybody's got their own taste, but like assaultive. Like movies where people get their head bashed into the wall 3 times and you're like, ooh, that looked like it hurt. Okay, cool. And then when they do it 40 more times and they do it through the whole movie and there's never a minute to breathe, that's to me is just kind of bleak and exhausting, and it's not as fun for me anymore personally. So I think they're at a good point right now where there's a lot of gore and it's fun and there's a lot of kills and there's enough to keep you interested and it's scary, but they haven't tipped over into that territory. You know what I mean?
I do, and I would I'd agree with that. You know, it's definitely a change, but I definitely wouldn't say it's a change for the worse. I think they are approaching that line that you're talking about, but like, you know, this is not a later Jason movie where, you know, like it's where it just becomes comical and, you know, they just smash someone's head against the wall until it turns into jelly, you know, there is enough other stuff in this movie. Like people aren't being stabbed every other scene. You know, it's a high body count, but you know, they kind of it comes in little chunks and then you have a few minutes to breathe and then it comes back around. It's not, you know, just it's not just 90 minutes of near constant stabbage. And you know, and they don't like, you use the word assault, I guess, like it's not, you know, I mean, obviously like he's murdering people in horrific ways, but like it's not, they've never made it sexual, you know, that's appreciated really, you know, like, so it's not, there are lines that they could cross and they have not yet, in my opinion. Like, you know, it's still, this is a fun movie to watch with friends on a Friday night, like, and it's not, even though it's more intense than some of the other ones, I wouldn't say that it's broken any rules. Like, I just think it's a great time.
It is, and I think that that's one thing that, excuse me, very few slashers can do as well as Scream is to juggle, you know, to walk that line between comedy and horror is really difficult thing to do. And I think the pacing of Scream 6 and the original is very similar in that the beats are perfect as far as comedy and horror together.
I agree. And on that note, let's why didn't test this button? There we go. It still works. I haven't done a show in a while, folks, and I had to do a lot of testing to make sure that some update hadn't broken any of my layouts. But first thing I want to talk about is the opening here. By the way, for audio listeners, we have full spoilers now. If you have not seen the movie, I recommend you turn this off. Please come back after you have seen the movie. But Dayna and I both loved it, and now we're going to talk about it in some more detail. So the opening of the movie, like we were talking about earlier, the Scream movies always have an interesting twist. My favorite up until now is probably Scream 4, where it's like the different opening scenes of all the stab movies, which is the franchise within the franchise. And, you know, there's some great cameos in there with some talented actresses. This one's really, really interesting, though. You have Samara Weaving, who was in the other movie by Radio Silence, the Ready or Not, which is also a great time. So she's talking with someone over the phone. She had a date, and her date is late, but he calls her to just let her know that he's on his way and he's lost, blah, blah, blah. And then she goes out in this dark alley to find him, and he turns up in a mask and stabs her to death. And then we do something that has never happened in any of these movies. He immediately takes his mask off. So I hear my dog scratching. There's I was at that moment hoping that, okay, so now are we going to know who one of the killers is the entire time. Because that's, that's never happened before. It's like, and I would love to sit through the whole movie being like, he's right there. But how did up to this point? How did you feel, Dayna? Like definitely something new for the series, and it got a thrill out of me for sure.
Well, I think that they did a great job of, again, balancing our expectations with, something new. I mean, we all knew that she's heading towards an alley, and we're like,
and what happens to people in alleys in horror movies?
Don't do that. And exactly what happened to her is what we thought happened to her, but then they immediately flip it around because he takes the mask off. So, you thought you knew what you were going in for, and it's just a perfect example of them subverting expectations and doing something so completely off kilter that I had no clue where it was headed. I didn't know if he was going to go back to the apartment and there would be another, like, a group of killers, because
there's always more than one. Right. Except for Scream 3, but Scream 3 is terrible.
Yeah, I said if I ever started a band, I would call it Courtney Cox's Scream 3 Bangs, because that's all I can think of when I think of that movie.
Excellent.
Yeah, I love the opening. I think it's a perfect example of subverting expectations. I could not have predicted any of what followed.
Okay, and then they take it and they take another turn. Turns out, by the way, he takes his mask off. It's Tony Revolori. He's in the new Spider-Man movies. He's in Servant on Apple TV Plus. He's an all around. He's a very talented young man, and I hope to see him in much more stuff. But yeah, so he goes back to his apartment, and his partner in crime calls him on the phone. Turns out it's not his partner in crime. He finds that guy dismembered in the fridge, and then this Tony Revolori also gets brutally murdered. So I'm like, okay. So my thought was, there's multiple groups of killers and they don't know each other, and that is now something that I want them to explore in a future movie.
Well, you know what else, and maybe it'll come back later, but I kept hoping that somehow, so Samara Weaving's character, whose name I'm forgetting, I want to say it's Elizabeth, but in any case, she's a film professor, right? She teaches slasher.
Yes, Laura Crane is how she's written on
thank you.
Wikipedia.
Okay. I am incorrect. So at any rate, she's a professor who teaches slasher classes, and I just kept hoping they would call back to her, or somehow it would have it would link back to that. That's right. Where my thinking was going.
There's one like toss away line where when they find out what happened to Tony Revolori's character, where Jasmine Savoy Brown is like, "Isn't that asshole from our film class?" Like, but that was the only
that's the toad from our film class.
Yeah, there's the only reference to it beyond this point, as far as I remember.
Yeah, I would love to see, I don't know, somehow I was like, okay, is this group of filmmakers? Is this a cult? Is this what does it have to do with her, is where my mind was going. But it was just a cold open.
And again, Scream is definitely known for its cold opens, and this is I keep saying it, but this is yet another very inventive one. Another thing I definitely want to talk about, probably my favorite scene in the movie, and I wish that it wasn't shown at all in the trailer, but the subway scene, and the group runs down to the subway. They're trying to go over to the secret hideout, and then they get separated. So there's a small group on one train, and then Jasmine Savoy Brown, Mindy, gets stuck on the other, and they're all surrounded by characters in Halloween costumes, including some ghost faces. And if you've ever been on the subway in New York, it's probably dramatized in this movie to a degree, but like there are some weird power phenomenons and stuff, like the lights blink and everything's in motion. And it's edited in a really interesting way where you can't it goes black and then the ghost faces are closer, but it's edited in a way where like it doesn't reveal who they're actually getting closer to until the attack happens. And by that I mean either the trio or Mindy. It cuts between them rapidly, and it cuts between their viewpoints very rapidly. And the ghost faces get closer and closer and closer, but you can't tell really who's going to be attacked until it happens, and it's Mindy, and she gets pretty messed up. She survives it, but it's she doesn't have a good day on this. It's not a good good day on the subway.
I was not happy when I thought they killed her. I was convinced she was going down, and I was very, very sad. No, I think it's again, it's really smartly written, and yeah, I wish that they had not revealed that in the trailer. And I wish that they had not shown the shrine, because that is huge. And that reveal would have been such a crazy moment if you had no clue.
Right. If you didn't know it was coming, and then it's like what the yeah, and all the artifacts from other kills. And my first question is, how did they get all these things? It's like all this should have been in police lockup. And it's like, oh, okay. So it was probably, 50% of the way through the movie, this is all evidence. How did they get this? And my wife was like, it's because the cop is the killer. And I'm like, really?
Yeah, when I watched
she figured it out halfway through.
Well, good for her.
Yeah.
Because I just figured they had to do it. They're going to give a throwaway line. It's not going to be linked to anything. They're just, and they say, oh, well, cops are dirty, and you can.
Yeah. So someone paid a lot of money to buy off a bunch of cops and get all this evidence. Which I guess is conceivable, but yeah. So I
just went with it. I loved it so much that there's, I mean, there are things I won't excuse as a suspension of disbelief, but those little bits, I'm
here for it for sure. Yeah. And I loved all the other masks, there are up until now, this is the 6th movie. Every movie's had 2 killers except Scream 3. So we're did they say in the movie it's like 10 or 11 killers up to now? Probably 11. And each mask is, it has its own visual cue, and the oldest one, Billy Loomis's mask, is really cracked and gray, so it's it adds an interesting visual for sure. Every ghost face has always looked identical. So I appreciated that. And then eventually you get to the end, and turns out there are 3 killers, and they have the first 3 masks on that, they all kind of look, that kind of messed up, but there are a lot of visual cues using the masks that are new to this movie that I really appreciate. There's one of them gets a blood splatter, and then Billy's mask is visually the oldest. I don't know. It's it was a cool thing, because again, Ghostface has always kind of looked the same, and has kind of stayed clean. And it was something that I appreciated. He's doing messy work, and he gets a little dirty.
Yeah, with the old mask, it's funny because my mind went to, are they referencing the new Halloweens? And I'm sure that's not the case, but
I hope not. I don't like the new Halloweens, and I am afraid that David Gordon Green is going to hack up The Exorcist, and I am terrified.
We can talk about the Halloweens later. I have pros and cons, and again, I don't know if it's Stockholm Syndrome, but I love the Halloween franchise, and if they keep making them, I'm going to keep seeing them.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm probably right there with you. Would you say that this movie is as meta as previous ones? I think.
Oh, yeah.
You think so? Yeah. Because I've heard some comments to the contrary, and I agree with you, and I would say that there's more subtle stuff here that obviously there's still the big speech about this is where we are, and this is what we can, this is what'll happen, and this is what the rules are, but there are other things that okay, for example, in every Scream movie, like the killer has always somehow survived things that would kill every normal person. Or like even in this movie, like how many times does Ghostface get clocked over the head? Like, and you'd think that over 25 years of Ghostface killers, they would wear a helmet under the mask. But somehow they never do. But like the killer always comes back until you get another beat, and then you get a definitive kill beat. But now that is happening more with the main cast. And it's kind of, like I don't want to say they're superheroes, but it's, it's a little silly. Like, for example, Courtney Cox, Gale Weathers, and Chad both sustain what would, like, based on the amount of time that before paramedics arrive or whatever, like those would be fatal stab wounds to the core and to the chest. But ultimately they live through it. What happened to Mindy? She gets stabbed in the stomach, so it wouldn't necessarily be immediately fatal, but like if she didn't get a doctor real fast, she's not going to make it. But and they all make it to the end, and that's, I think that's a meta jab. If it's me asking, this is like, okay, we are now 6 movies into this. And if we look at Freddy or Jason 6 or 7 movies in, and there are ridiculous things happening, not only to Jason, but to all the people that he's killing, and some of them survive it. Like maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think that it's pointing out the fact that we are late in a franchise. And people are surviving things that humans could not survive, because that's what they do when you're 6 movies into a slasher movie, or 6 movies into a slasher thing. And it's okay, but this is done way better than any of those movies that I'm making fun of. You know what I mean? Like, am I overthinking this? Or
thought of it that way. That's a really interesting take. And it totally tracks for me, but I hadn't thought of it that way. I just went with it because I'm so emotionally invested in these characters that, whatever happens to them, if they end up dying, if they end up surviving, I mean, I'm really here for, like I said, especially Mindy. But I don't know how you could argue that this isn't very meta when, okay, there are probably less throwaway lines throughout about, oh, we shouldn't have done that. Oh, I'll be right back. Don't run up the stairs. Those movies are full of, girls running upstairs.
They still run up the stairs. They go into rooms, they go into a room and lock the door, but okay, we're now in a place with no exits. And then it becomes this whole thing because they have to cross again, yeah.
People don't call it out as much in this movie. That's true. And maybe that's what people are referring to, is that when that happens, no one's like, oh my God, now we're locked in a bedroom. Why did we do this? But the entire overarching story is meta, because you're harkening back to all of the murders and all of the stab movies. So yeah. But I guess there's less like just kind of snarky meta commentary throughout. They've more condensed it into a few spots, and then with Mindy's speeches, and then you can see them doing the things, but they're not narrating them the way Randy did in the earlier ones, right? Maybe that's what people are getting out of it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I overthink things, because that's what, like there is enough here, like with any of the Scream movies, to kind of, if you go through it with a fine-tooth comb, like you can find motivations for things. But I agree with you. Again, it's different, and we're six movies in, and it's a very different time than it was when the first 3 movies came out. Like, what was it, 2001 or something, when Scream 3, like Scream 1 and 2 were real close together, and there was a few years for Scream 3, but then there was 10 years before Scream 4 and another 10 or 11 before Scream 5, right? So it's some time has passed, and movies are different now, even horror movies, and I think that is, it's making fun of being late in a franchise, but it's also poking fun at the reality of cinema right now. And I really think, like, again, my favorite example of that is like Scream 4, and they're making fun of streamers and social media culture in that movie. Right. And at this point, that like fucking TikTok is tearing the world down piece by piece. And, there's they don't hammer down on it as much in this movie as they did like in Scream 4, but there's references to it for sure. And, it's probably more subtle. And I think, it's there. Mindy gives the speech, but they're not, like you say, they're not calling it out as often. Because, even as much as they did in Scream 5, there's always a character in Scream 5. Every other scene, somebody is sitting just watching one of the stab movies to pass the time. And they're like, yeah, man, like this franchise really falls apart in the 5th movie. So it doesn't. I think it's all there, but I think it's more subtext or the majority of it is in the subtext, whereas previously it was kind of both.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And I mean, but yeah, the entire, the entire story, because you're going back and counting down from the last killers to the first ones. That's meta, right?
Oh, totally. No, it's literally like, it's a recap of the entire franchise. And I said earlier, I kind of think this movie most closely follows Scream 2 as far as structure and the killers are related to some people, etc. The main killer is Dermot Mulroney's character. He's the cop, and he is the father of Richie from the last movie. And there are 3 killers this time, and the other 2 are his children. Jack Quaid, Richie's siblings, and that was the thing in Scream 2 was the main killer was Mrs. Loomis, Billy's mom. But yeah, no, there's a whole shrine to the Woodsboro killings, and there's references to all of them, and it's counting down to the one. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's super meta. Yeah, and he's filming them. And that was Richie from the other movie was, he's making his own. I don't know. It's an argument that I don't really think holds up. This movie's pretty meta. Maybe it's not exactly the flavor that it's a different flavor than previous movies, but also for as much of this franchise that remains the same, it has to adapt to the times. You can't. Structurally, it's the same movie 6 times over, but each one is very reflective of the era that it's made in and what has come before. And the early movies were making fun of late 80s slasher movies because, it began as an interesting and scary genre and kind of spiraled out of control. And there were still some highlights, but largely it was a mess. And then now the Scream movies are, as much as making fun of classic slasher movies, are also making fun of the Scream movies, so it's it doesn't get more meta than that, in my opinion. I'm sorry, go ahead, say that again.
Oh no, I was just saying, I'm with you.
One more thing I definitely want to talk about, is all this stuff. We mentioned earlier that Melissa Barrera's character, Sam, is seeing visions of Billy Loomis. And, she's seeing therapy about, she went through this traumatic experience. Now she's seeing therapy. And she's taking medicine that, in theory, suppresses the hallucinations. But even so, late, second half of the movie, they reveal this big shrine, and she goes up to Billy's mask, and she sees Billy again, and that starts to come back around. And then I'm curious how you feel about the way it's handled with Sam in kind of the third act, where she hears Billy's voice, and Billy's dead. It's not really Billy talking to her, but it's her memory of a killer that is unfortunately her father, blah, 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 and that gets to you, especially considering this terrible experience that you've had. And Billy's encouraging her to pick up the knife and stuff. And eventually, she picks up the knife and she puts the mask on, and she murders Dermot Mulroney rather violently. And then And no, I'm just like, it's they are really examining Sam's psyche, I would say, in a way that they have not in these movies before. Because she's ostensibly the protagonist, but she's a little bit unhinged. And she makes a really symbolic choice at the end. Like she's got the mask in her bag, and her friends are saying, "Hey, come on, let's go," and then she drops the mask and moves on. So and that was as a viewer, I would have been okay with her keeping the mask and seeing how that plays out in the next one. But it's just a really interesting psychic examination of Sam, and all these characters have been through trauma, but it's definitely, it's a really personal thing for her. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that and how it's handled, or if you wish if they gone a different direction, or how do you feel about it?
I think I'm going to disagree somewhat with you here, because while I don't at all hate her seeing her dad, and I mean, I love the original, man. Like
I said, I like it better in this movie than I did in Scream 5. It's done more sparingly and more effectively than in the last one.
You're definitely right. It's more sparing, so it looks better the way they did it because they're putting it in a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely, but I don't feel like they needed it. She can fight on her own without her father, and I don't. That pull, I mean, it's an interesting thought, that pull of is she going to end up being a serial killer because her dad is? But if it's just because of her dad, I just feel like she can stand on her own. I don't know that bringing him back served a big enough purpose to do it again.
And on that note, I'd agree. Like, I do not like the "it's in your blood" explanation, and she's a strong character who has proven she can defend herself, right? But there's a line that you could cross, and I think, she definitely gets angry and probably overdoes it a bit with the stabbing and the guns and things. But there's like the Joker has said it before, it takes one bad day. All it takes is a little push, to cross the line, and then you're different forever. But I don't like the "it's in your blood" explanation. But I do like the, you said, the hook. It's almost like a dangling carrot. It's just you did this once before, and maybe it kind of felt good. It's. So I like the subtle draw, but I also like that she is a strong, independent character that, can defend herself and ultimately made the right choice for herself. But there are probably less ham-fisted ways to do that than seeing her dead father, who she never met, by the way. She was an infant when he died, or might not have been born yet. I don't know.
Yeah, she was. I think she wasn't born yet, is the explanation they give in 5. But yeah, I feel like if it was going to be woven in or come up more before, I mean, I guess she talks about it at the therapist, but it just feels like we're careening towards the end where, okay, if you're going to bring him in, it should be some kind of ultimate showdown or something, or a way to definitively get rid of him. Instead, he's just saying, "Take the knife." She takes the knife, and then his reflection disappears, right? And then she just does what she's doing. And I just don't think it's necessary. I don't hate it, but I don't know what it adds. I mean, I suppose it's probably setting up things to come as well.
That's probably true, and I know these guys have ideas for some number of movies, they're, and I don't recall if they've said it or not, but if I was given the keys to a franchise like this, I would say, okay, this is what we do in the next one, and if people like it, this is what we do after that, and this is what we do after that. Even if they don't have scripts, they sit, they haven't, they know, you know what I mean? It's and maybe that's what it's for. It's not. I don't love the Skeet Ulrich thing, but if it means that we get to see him again great. And it's not a defining thing for Sam's character, because like I said before, like she makes her own decisions, and she makes the correct one at the end of the movie. But like, if that's the case, do we need him there at all? And it is what it is. And I love it when they bring back old characters. Like Kirby's back.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm who that was built for. But again, I think you gotta have a purpose for it. Like, if you're going to do something, pull out the big guns.
And maybe they pay it off in
original killer. Yeah. I'm just hoping for Stu. I'm waiting for Stu.
Yeah, get me some Matthew Lillard. And okay, now we're talking about cast coming back. Did you miss Sidney Prescott?
Of course I did.
Yeah,
How
me
could
too.
you not? It makes me wonder what the plan was before that all happened. What did they have planned for her? And I've looked around for answers, and of course, I've gotten nothing.
Whose podcast was it? Melissa Barrera did an interview very recent. Maybe it was Collider Ladies Night. I listened to a podcast interview with Melissa Barrera, and she said that she received, right after the movie got greenlit, she received an early draft. And this was 30 days after. Less than 2 months, certainly after Scream 5. So they already basically had a draft written for in case they had another movie. It was a few months before they started filming, and the draft that the shooting draft was almost completely different. But she didn't say in the interview that it had something to do with Nev Campbell not being involved, but it almost has to. And there's also there's an article where Emma Roberts declined being involved because of Nev, and this was a year ago, last spring, as they were developing Scream 6, so there was definitely a plan to involve Sidney in some way, and a plan to involve other characters potentially, that didn't pan out because of this decision. And it's for a reason that I never want to hear. It's just because they weren't going to pay her what she deserves. And a lot of the success of this franchise falls on her. And not to say, she's certainly not the only contributor to the success of Scream, but she's certainly a big part of it. And I hope they can work it out. And maybe I wish it was a creative reason that she wasn't in the movie, as opposed to a stupid budgetary one. And if she, yeah,
and I have a lot of mixed feelings because, there's an instinct in me that says I shouldn't even see this movie. They should have brought Nev back and paid her what she wanted. Well, of course they should have. So yeah, I guess I'm curious what the original plan was before that. I'm assuming she was going to be central, maybe not. So it's like we missed an entirely different film, probably.
Mm-hmm. And there are. I'm a big fan of the Rocky and Creed movies, and Sylvester Stallone, spoiler alert, is not in Creed 3. Rocky is passively mentioned once, but I don't even think they mention him by name. They, this, so it's and it's all for the wrong reasons. That's hey, if they give us a reason that, that Sidney Prescott needs to move on from the franchise, so be it. But I wish that was in the movie, and I wish it was Nev Campbell that can say the words, as opposed to all of this mess. And that's just, I don't want to end the show on that, but it was worth asking because, she's one of the originals, and, we've lost Dewey, and because of this, we've now lost Sidney. And it's, it's a little unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah. made me get a little bit sad that, I mean, I don't know that there was another way to do it considering she wasn't involved in any capacity, but it was such a throwaway line.
I mean,
It was
that's,
just,
and like I was saying, that's exactly what they did to Rocky. Like it's just oh yeah, Sydney. I forget what they said, but like Sydney's busy, or or we don't want to bother Sydney with this.
Sydney and Mark, I think her husband's name is Mark. Sydney and Mark have taken the kids somewhere safe. She sends her love. She deserves her happy ending.
Yeah.
She deserves to be safe. And they say, okay, we agree. And that's that.
And that it seems like a disservice to Sydney, considering how proactive she was in Scream 5, which I really liked. You know what I mean? So it's, I mean, and it's kind of, I think in Scream 5, it kind of toes the line because she talks like a murderer, but like it's, she came out of her way because, I have children, so I'm not going to sleep until this is over. And considering that and how she definitively plants that flag, it seems a little weak to just say she's off hiding with her family. But if that's, and having said that, I love this movie. I like it better than the last one, but it's, it's definitely there.
Miss her.
Yeah, I do for sure. Anything else that you definitely want to touch on before we wrap it up? Any other comments or something we missed? Please.
Yeah, we were going to talk about the production design.
Yes, we were. Please go ahead.
Woo! Okay, so in my former life, I was a set decorator, and
What does that? I'm sorry. Before you continue, tell the folks at home what that means.
Means that all the things you see on set were purchased by someone, and then that was me, literally like driving around in a van all day, loading furniture and whatnot into the back of my van. It's actually a lot of fun, realizing worlds, and I think that it really informs my directing as well, because I look at everything as this sort of look at the mise en scene, and I'm like very photographerly about it. I like placement and composition, and I like things to look like moving paintings. So yeah, sometimes I see movies and I think, oh, the production design's astounding, that's gorgeous, great job. And sometimes I see things like this where I think that just looks so fun to work on, oh my god, and like what could I possibly have snuck in my pocket? Like, it's amazing.
The TV that fell on Stu Macher.
Woo. So fun. There was so much stuff in that shrine that I don't think I caught it all the first time, and the second time I watched it again and I found more stuff, and I'll bet there's still more when I watch it again.
There absolutely is, and it's of course in an old movie theater, because why wouldn't it be? Like it's wonderful. And do you know, okay, there are the scene on the train I keep mentioning with all these Halloween costumes, like there's a guy dressed as Freddy Krueger, and it's obviously like it's not just a guy who's in a Christmas sweater, like it's a Freddy Krueger mask. Do you have to license that stuff? Or is that
I will
do you know?
I will decline to answer that question on the basis of art department legalities are super confusing.
Okay,
I have heard
fair.
people say things like it's a registered character, you have to get permission. I've heard people say things like it's a costume, and if you're using it as described, or as, what's the word I'm looking for?
As intended?
Thank you. You're using it as intended. It's okay. I'm assuming that with something this budget that they did license the actual licensed characters in some way, but I can't say for certain. So yeah, that's an interesting.
I mean, that's just out of curiosity.
Yeah. No, it's a good question, but yeah, it's a little bit out of my purview. It's like legalities are so crazy and they vary from show to show. Like there was, I will not name the company, but there's one company, one studio that I've worked for that, oh my God, I had to clear literally everything I bought or rented. Even a sofa. A sofa had to be legally cleared, in theory, at least. A lamp.
You had to find out if like that fabric was produced by some artist that was, yeah, okay.
Exactly. So, I mean, not me, but I had to take pictures of everything I bought and forward them to legal. And then I'd go on other shows where they're like, using it as intended, it's fine. Nobody's going to care. We're not doing something gross with it. We're not, suggesting the product has killed someone.
I know, like, I just used to work on the reality circuit, like, years ago now, probably like before I met you, like, and they would always, okay, I did like 16 episodes of House Hunters, and they're filming in a kitchen, and they would tape over the logos on all the appliances because they didn't want like General Electric or Maytag to call them up and want money. So like, just out of, just to basically to avoid the risk, you put like some kind of fancy artsy tape over the logo.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I worked in a convenience store once, which was just absolute hell too. So you call it Greeking when you're covering.
Greeking. Well, I did a shoot in a grocery store, and they were like turning bottles around. Like, it was a big mess. Yeah.
Right. Oh, terrible. So yeah, I shot in a convenience store once where I was a set dresser that day, so I was helping actually dress the set. And yeah, we had to go around and Greek and like turn things upside down and hide them behind other things. And then, you're not sure exactly because you're just set decorating, so you're not sure exactly, roughly what's going to be in screen, or they'll at least tell you there's no way this area is ever going to show up. Okay, cool, I won't worry about that. But a lot of times you do all that work and then they're just using like really shallow focus or something anyway.
It doesn't even matter. Yep.
But you do it anyway. But one thing, I read a thread on Twitter from an entertainment lawyer the other day about this. He was, again, I am not a lawyer, but it was that guy was saying that as long as you're using it as intended, especially in indie movies, that people don't care. And that the reason that they're so careful about it in studio movies is more because they don't want to tick off people who paid for advertising by having brands that did not pay for advertising. Just
okay. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to turn that off now. Ghostface just dropped in to threaten us. So you don't. That makes a lot of sense then. So Coca-Cola paid to have a billboard in the movie, but then you don't want to have just like someone drinking a Pepsi, or like a can of Pepsi sitting on the counter because Pepsi didn't pay for ad space. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. And this, this is probably a not that interesting topic, but it's cool to me.
You got it if you want.
No, it's all good. It's the process is always of interest. So if any final thoughts before we wrap up? I think it's obvious we both loved the movie. I liked Scream 5, but I loved this one. This was a definite step up on basically all levels.
No, I absolutely agree. If you get, if you're watching this far, spoilers, you've already seen it. I was going to say, if you get a chance to see it in the theater, see it, you probably have. If you get a chance to see it in 4D and you've never seen a 4D movie, do it, because it's weird and it's wild and it's something completely different. So,
I'm going to try to find a chance, but like this movie is stacked. Like there's so much stuff coming out. It's every week until August. I have something on my review calendar, and like if I get to do 30% of those, it'll be a good year for the show. Like it's crazy. But I would absolutely love to have you back. I know you got an Evil Dead poster back there. Evil Dead Rise comes out in a few weeks. Are you, if you're not busy?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. You're talking to a person who stood in line hours to meet Sam Raimi. Yes, Evil Dead is damn close to Scream. Maybe even tied. So yes, I am so ready for it. I'm trying to avoid any articles about it, but I look forward to digging into them after I see it, So I just barely skimmed the headlines of the South by Southwest premiere enough to say, sounds like it was pretty damn awesome, and then I left it at that.
I said the same thing. Like you said you didn't want spoilers, but since you mentioned it, I have heard some. I don't know if I've read reviews, but I have seen some like quick impressions from some various people that I follow, and there are the buzz is good. So that makes me very excited. I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, as always, everybody, thanks for watching. If you want to hear more, don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Brandon. I'm Engine25 on all the things, sometimes with an underscore. You can find us on YouTube podcast services by searching Engine25 Reviews, no space in Engine25. we'll be back soon with another movie review. And until then, go watch a movie.
Thanks for having me.